Thank you for staying with us on The Big Story this evening. We're looking at what the president had to say over the weekend with respect to individuals he says, quote unquote, are derailing his development efforts in the country, and his move to ensure that by the time he leaves the presidency in 2022, there will be peace in the Republic of Kenya. We're doing this with Irungu Kangata, who's a Murang'a senator, Professor George Wajakoya, who's a lawyer who's joining us from our City Center studio. We also have Javas Bigambo, who's a governance expert. Gentlemen, thank you for staying with us. We are still trying to see if we can speak to Mark Nyamita, Member of Parliament Uriri, in a couple of minutes. But just as this conversation is going on, Donald Kipkorir on Twitter says, every weekend, to justify their pardiems, members of Parliament from Bungoma, Murang'a, Kiambu, and one from Kilifi, and one from Kakamega have put Kenya on a 2022 campaign mode. It is good Uhuru Kenyatta called bluff their alleged loyalty to him, undermining his handshake can't be loyalty. And that is where I want to bring in Professor George Wajakoya, who's joining us from our City Center studio. Sir, so just before we took the break, the senator said, I mean, there is no heir apparent from the central region. There isn't really a kingpin. And looking at what Donald Kipkorir says, there is a need for the president to have people who are loyal to him. We've seen the reaction, we've seen the relationship between the president and his deputy in the last couple of months. There are those who say this is a strained relationship. I mean, from the first initial 5 years, things have been very different. Why would the president fight to have people, A, who are loyal to him if he knows in the next 5 years he will not be there? And why are we putting specific emphasis on the deputy president who has to ensure or wants to be the president of the Republic of Kenya in 2022?
Thank you very much. And Donald Kipkorir has said it the way it is, and I'm going to look for him probably this week to have a cup of tea for being bold enough to tell Kenyans the truth. And that's what Kenyans need to hear. We don't need to come here and karanga njugu in our mouth, trying to tell lies when we know that inside us, we are actually wolves in a sheep's skin. Those people who have been undermining the president, as Kipkorir put it very correctly, are people from Central Province, especially members of Parliament, with a few hyenas from Western Province, and also Kilifi. These are people who are taking the president. First of all, they have never even come up to condemn corruption. They got those churches, and I'm sure if I was God, I would ban some of those churches. They got those churches every Sunday. They got the president. They told the line, not shame the president. The people shaming the president, I'm glad are from Mount Kenya itself. You talk how? You are the one telling the president, undermining the president today. Tomorrow you are somewhere with Ruto trying to do what you have to do. We don't want that, and the president is right, and I'm backing him fully. Thank you.
Javas, should the president have been more direct? Should he have come out clearly and just said, guys, this is what's going on. I don't like this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because I did mention at the beginning of this show, this is not the first time we're seeing the president visibly angry about something. Should he be bolder? I mean, this is his last term. He has a legacy to protect. And there are those who seem to think that probably this is why he was upset over the weekend. You have 4 years to go. If someone was to ask, and I believe there's a couple of months ago, there's a school girl who actually asked the president, so if someone was to ask you what your legacy is, what would that be? And the president...
Piece of legislation in terms of directing his leaders or actors within government that he is leading. Let us also take note of the hard fact that the president was directing his remarks to various leaders who belong to his party. Now, look, if it's a question of housekeeping issues, the president should not actually have such an outburst at a public forum. There is the need for the president to put his house in order, the Jubilee party and the Jubilee administration. At the end of it all, the president will not embrace any form of excuse and say that certain legislators from whatever region of the country undermined his power or his authority, and that actually derailed his development agenda. He has had the first 5 years and now the second 5 years, which we are nearly in the middle of it or thereabout. The president has got the power, the authority, and actually the goodwill and the support of Kenyans. Now, when after a hard-fought election in 2017, when the president reached out to his erstwhile political nemesis, Raila Odinga, And then they had the handshake. Kenyans supported it. It demonstrates that Kenyans are willing and ready to support the president or any agenda that puts country first, that takes Kenya forward. And that is why it is important for the president to speak to all Kenyans, to speak to all leaders. Now, I am not faulting him for the use of his Gikuyu language or vernacular, but it's proper that if he wanted or he desires to direct some remarks at leaders in the Rift Valley, let him speak directly to those leaders in the Rift Valley. If he wants to speak to leaders from Nyanza, let him speak to leaders in Nyanza in a language they can understand, or leaders in the coastal region, etc. So we expect that the president will move expeditiously in terms of manifestation of his anger, but also make that anger productive in Kenya by seeing him work and helping to support institutions to work properly. And actually, even if it's a question of reading the Riot Act, let him read it, let him have his house in order.
Javas, perhaps that anger that you're talking about, there those would say this is anger that is coming from the fact that the president knows, one, he has very few years, 3 or so to go before the lapse of his tenure as president of the Republic of Kenya. And there's something you've said, that he has the goodwill of Kenyans. Does he?
I think the president has the goodwill of Kenyans. When you listen, for example, to the remarks made by Professor Jakoya himself, and representing also various parts of, of Kenya and also professionals, tells you that from various quarters, actually the president has got the support, whether it is from political quarters amongst elected leaders, and Honorable Kangata here will perhaps respond to that as to whether they are giving the president the support that he deserves as leaders from the central region. It is observable that from, say, the western region, the Nyanza region, after the handshake, leaders from those parts of the country and my fellow citizens have expressed the goodwill to support the president. We have had even former nemesis of his, like Honorable Joho and others, who've expressed support to the president.
So the handshake?
After the handshake. The president has got the goodwill of elected leaders and citizens. It is time for the president to make sure that he gets to work, folds his sleeves, and make sure that every person within his administration gets to work, not for future aspirations and raw power, but for the implementation of the Jubilee manifesto, the Big Four agenda, to the extent that they will. Let them demonstrate that they are working day after day.
Senator, is the president getting the support that he needs? Is the politics and the politicking and the campaigns that are taking place in central Kenya standing in his way as he purported over the weekend? Is he getting the support from his own backyard? Because you come from there.
Yes, I think to the best of my knowledge, I think people from our region are really supportive of the president. First, personally, I strongly believe that Uhuru Kenyatta has done a very good job, contrary to what some politicians from our region have been saying. I say that particularly because I'm a leader from Murang'a County. I've seen what the government has done. And in fact, by the way, when you look at a place like Kiharu constituency, what this government of Uhuru Kenyatta has done is far much more what Moi, Kenyatta 1 and Kibaki did combined. So therefore for us, for me, myself, particularly when I was a person who comes from Murang'a County, particularly in terms of infrastructure, Uhuru Kenyatta government has done a good job, more than the rest combined. But on the other hand, let me also admit that there's a huge voice that seems to be quite supportive of the Deputy President, which also seems suspicious, as if Deputy President wants to be shunted aside. And some of those leaders and also some of that voice is quite agitated in a way when they feel as if he wants to be shunted aside, and there's some form of a fight over the political soul of our region. And to that extent, maybe it is bringing some jittery in some quarters. And maybe what we are seeing in our region may be a manifestation of a fight over that. But again, when it comes to parliament, where also members of parliament are expected to support the president's agenda, Personally, I have seen leaders from our region ensuring president agenda is being pushed forward. For instance, several pieces of legislation which have been brought before the Senate and also the National Assembly, it has been prosecuted as per the wishes of the president. So yes, to that extent, yes. But I have seen some form of jittery amongst deputy president supporters in our region.
So on one hand, both you and Java say the president has the goodwill of the people, he has the support of his people. You say even in parliament you push his agenda forward. But then there's the question, then if the president has all the support and if his agenda is being pushed forward in parliament as well, why should he bother with what the other team is doing? Not. So if you the president has 3 years.
I think the president is realizing late in the day that one, he until campaigning. When you're campaigning, you must tell people what you are planning to do. The question is, the deputy president who is on the same ticket with the president, what is he telling Kenyans he's going to do that he can't do now? Is he saying that the government that he's serving has failed to deliver? Is he acknowledging that nothing is being delivered by the Jubilee government? Is he telling Kenyans that he has lost confidence in his boss? That's exactly what's going on. So the president needs to take action against, not against, he needs to take action right in his office because his principal assistant is right out on the street campaigning. We've seen deputy presidents even before. Even the former president Mwai Kibaki, the current president Uhuru, before he was endorsed by Mwai Kibaki, he never went out all campaigning. He just relaxed. So what's so serious that William Ruto has to every single day be all over launching projects that don't go beyond the plaque that he flags off?
Perhaps it's because he has made it clear that he intends to be a candidate in 2022. Perhaps it's because, and one would argue, that there are individuals who are perceived to be very close to President Uhuru Kenyatta who've made it clear that the presidency of William Ruto is not welcome. Perhaps it's because he gets the feeling that he may not get the support of the system come 2022, and maybe he needs to do his homework.
Maybe the president, the deputy president needs to look at his title. He is a deputy president. By default, he should be following what his boss wants him to do. If his boss doesn't want him to campaign and he continues campaigning, it actually shows he disregards the president. There is no other way to call it. So if he wants to be the president and not be the deputy president, then he can just do the honorable thing and resign. But when you're a deputy president, and in this constitution, the deputy president is a principal assistant. In case anything, the president becomes incapacitated today, the president, unfortunately, God forbid, dies, or for whatever reason, William Ruto is supposed to take over. He's supposed to champion the agenda of the government. But we are seeing him being at, obviously at cross purpose with the president, and this is what is worrying not only his president, but the rest of Kenyans. So the president, we want to tell the president that you have the goodwill of Kenyans. Take action, and take action not too far, but right in front of where you are. Because you cannot have your deputy, who is pulling in a different directions, with stooges that he planted in your own backyard. And I think also I want to tell the president that you don't have to threaten people every now and again. Get out of State House and act. We have had this noise around corruption. We have had around this noise about now politicians. And the president says, I'm going to do, I'm going to do. I can't wait to see my president moving into action and doing something. That will be the day Kenyans will know we have a president who means what he says and says what he means.
Javas Bigambo, in a minute, you get the final word in this entire conversation. The way forward for the president, who was visibly angry over the weekend, saying he's going to deal with people who are anti his development agenda. We both of you agree that he has the goodwill of the people, and the member of parliament says he needs to do a little bit more than just talk.
He needs to do what he has to do, and he needs to put his house in order. We know very well from the perspective of the scripture that a house divided cannot stand. And we are seeing already that the House is not standing, it's wavering. And I don't want to imagine that the House of Jubilee was built on quicksand. The president actually needs to work. Remember that at the end of the day, nobody will remember how people were campaigning during this term. People will remember the administration of Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. If he just realizes that fact, he will work. If it's cracking the whip, let him crack the whip. The president needs to reorganize his house. The president needs to work. The president needs to be focused on the Jubilee Manifesto and the Big Four agenda. The president and his administration need to work.
Okay. So the president and his administration need to work. And that is where we bring this entire conversation to an end. Gentlemen, thank you so much for speaking to us this evening on The Big Story. Rungo Kangata, Muranga Senator, thank you for your time. Professor George Wajakoya, always a pleasure hosting you on The Big Story. Mark Nyamita, Member of Parliament, Uriri, sir, allow me to apologize. We had issues with the cameras there, and that's why it took a while for us to get you to be part of this conversation. But all the same, we are grateful you are able to take part in this conversation. And a big thank you as well to Javas Bigambo, who's a governance expert. Allow me to leave it at that on The Big Story. I'm Linda Ogutu.